This episode is presented by 4-Star Aero Flight Center in Flagler, Florida. For more information, visit 4staraero.com.
Information Mike, time 1350 Zulu, wind 3407, visibility 10, skies clear, temperature 6, dew point -3, altimeter 3030. Visual approach to runway 29 in use, runway 62429, path out of service, target top frequency 118.905, ground frequency 121.75, pattern altitude 1000 feet, bird activity about the airfield. All aircraft remain clear of Daytona approach control class Charlie airspace until two-way radio communication has been established with Daytona approach. Advise on this contact, your information Mike.
And Mike. Flagler ground, Seneca 25 Papa Alpha. Good morning.
Seneca 25 Papa Alpha, runway 6, taxi via taxiway Delta and Echo cross runway 11.
Taxi to runway 6 via Delta Echo crossing 11 Seneca 25 Papa Alpha.
Even if the ATIS was telling us to use runway 29, ground controls asked us to taxi to runway 6, and this is the runway we're going to use for our traffic pattern. And a traffic pattern is a sequence of a takeoff and a landing on the same runway. And we better get very familiarized with the traffic patterns because it's something we're doing all the time during a training, whether we're learning how to fly or we're getting familiarized with a new aircraft. And it's basically composed of 5 legs. The first one is the upwind or the departure. Then we have the crosswind leg, the longest, the downwind leg, and the base leading us to the final leg, which ends up with a landing. There are 2 types of traffic pattern: the standard left turn at an altitude or height above the ground of 1,000 feet, non-standards right turn, and any altitude which is not 1,000 feet. And this information can be found on the airport chart. And at Flagler, today's airport, all turns are to the left at an altitude of 1,000 feet, making it a standard traffic pattern. We'll be using a Seneca PA-34 as a complex machine and a Cessna 172. Until now, all pre-takeoff checklists have been completed. Now we need to do the takeoff checklist, which is the TTSR, stands for time. It's got to be noted. Transponder to alt, switches, the boost pumps are on, taxi lights are off, landing lights are on, and the runway heading on the gyro. So on the panel, we turn on the boost pumps, the landing light, making sure our mixture is rich, turn on the transponder on alt, and we are good to go. So full throttle. Now we're looking for any type of alarms. The airspeed is live, and since there are no alarms, we can continue our takeoff. 55 knots, gentle rotation, and we'll leave the aircraft accelerate to its best rate of climb, VY at 84 knots. We have to maintain runway heading and no more than 10 degrees bank, and keep it straight with the rudder pedals. At 400 feet, there is the first checklist. Boost pumps are off, landing lights are off. If we used any flaps, flaps up. Now we're ready for our after takeoff checklist. Pitch for VY, 84 knots, flaps ups, boost pumps off, landing lights off. But in a traffic pattern, you might want to keep them. In a complex aircraft, it's almost the same thing.
All right, let's do
Okay,
it.
TTSR.
There you go.
Time. It is 10:10.
Audio throw, Phoenix 1-2, 4 wide.
Transponder. Switches on.
Number 2 falling, says
Landing light on. Beacons on.
6 wind 3605.
Runway heading. It's going to be runway 6.
TTSR, here the checklist is exactly the same. Time, noted, transponder, alt, switch, boost pumps, taxi lights are off, landing lights are on, and the runway heading is calibrated on the directional gyro.
Seneca 25 Papa Alpha, runway 6, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff. Requesting a short delay on takeoff. Seneca 25 Papa Alpha.
Delay approved. I got traffic 2 miles to Cessna.
We'll make it very quick. Seneca 25 Papa Alpha.
Okay, we're 465, went out of turn. You're going to be number 2 following that. Don't turn base. Don't turn base on me. Okay. You're number 2 following that says that 1.5 miles. Runway 6, clear, touch and go, wind calm.
465, sorry, we have traffic inside, and we'll clear touch and go.
A6. We're good. Let's go.
Okay, full throttle, no alarm. We can continue with our takeoff. Rotation speed is at 70 knots. At this point, we pitch for VY, 91 knots. We can hit the brakes to stop the wheels.
Blue line. Gear up.
And no more runway, so now we can put the gears up. At 400 feet, manifold pressure at 25 inches.
25 square.
And RPM at 2005.
Okay, fuel pumps off.
And the fuel pumps are turned off one at a time.
Landing light off.
After takeoff checklist, now we pitch for VY, 91 knots, making sure the gears are up, manifold pressure, 25 square, the flaps are up, and the boost pumps are off, and the landing lights are off. But I try to keep them on during a traffic pattern work. It is important to anticipate leveling off the aircraft, and for this we have a rule of thumb. You take your climb rate and you divide it by 10%, which gives you your altitude before which you need to level off the aircraft. Now we've been flying the upwind and we are turning into our next leg, which is the crosswind. And now this is really where we can see the difference between a real aircraft and a flight simulator. I wish a Cessna 172 could climb that fast, but hey, it doesn't matter. Now we are cruising on the crosswind, and we should have our heading, in this case 330, our runway heading at 3 o'clock. We should be leveled at pattern altitude with an attitude indicator neutral and a VSI, vertical speed indicator, neutral. Now we can reduce our engine RPM to 2,200 RPMs. Now, how far away should we extend our crosswind? The distance should be about half a mile to 3/4 of a mile, or roughly 1,000 meters. Now we are level, we are reaching 3/4 of a mile, and we are ready to turn downwind. At this point, we have a maximum bank angle of 25 degrees, and we are slowly reaching a heading of 240. Let's quickly verify that our runway heading is on the bottom of the directional gyro. Now we are at the very beginning of the downwind, and it's a good idea to pull the carburetor heat. We really want to make sure our carburetor doesn't freeze when we are in the traffic pattern. Now we're coming back, and traffic control has authorized us to join the traffic pattern at the beginning of the downwind. We are flying at 160 knots, and we are reducing our speed to 130 knots, which is the maximum speed we can operate the landing gears, the VLO.
Seneca 25 Papa Alpha, overhead the way station.
25 Papa Alpha, roger, got you in sight, runway 6, wind is variable at 5, clear to land.
Runway 6, clear to land, Seneca 25 Papa Alpha.
Our partner for this episode is 4-Star Aero Services. You can find more information at 4staraero.com. It's a flight center located in Flagler, Florida, and it's a family-operated business. They're doing some instruction from private pilot all the way to commercial pilots. They're renting aircraft, and they have a nice fleet of aircraft, pristinely well maintained, and they have special products as well and programs for time builders, pilots who want to build some experience. They are extremely affordable, and being located in Florida basically offers them a nice weather all year around. You can fly nearly 365 days a year. So for more information, just log on 4staraero.com. As a matter of fact, I know they're going to have a brand new website very soon, or give them a call and you'll be pleased by their services. Now, as we are flying the downwind, there is a point where we're going to be at the same level as our landing point. It's called being abeam the numbers. It's just a name. It's not necessarily the numbers. It can be different things. When we're flying VFR, we are usually aiming at landing on the numbers. On IFR, we are aiming at the touchdown zone. But anyway, we call that being abeam the numbers. Now, abeam the numbers, there are a few things we need to do. Is to call abeam the numbers, start our timer, put the flaps, landing lights are on, boost pumps are on, we adjust the power and trim the aircraft. Now let's talk about the outbound distance of 1.6 nautical miles or 3 kilometers before we turn to base. And for this Piper Seneca PA-34 at 110 knots, it takes us 53 seconds. With the Skyhawk, it's only gonna take us 64 seconds at 90 knots. Just have a look at the show notes because there is a table with the different speeds for 1.6 nautical miles. So here we are putting on our boost pumps, our landing lights, first notch of flap, and watch out for the ballooning effect of the aircraft, which means that with no attitude, the altitude changes very rapidly. With a complex aircraft, here's our famous GUM checklist.
Gear down. Gas, undercarriage, mixture. And we go full props.
The GUMS checklist. Gas to the fullest tank, undercarriage, 3 green, no red, visual check with 1 in the mirror, mixture full reach, props full in, switches, pumps and lights on.
Oh, let me trim that. Big time.
And don't forget, the GUMS checklist should be done at least 3 times before the landing. Now it's time to pull the first notch of flaps and adjust the power. At all phases of the flight, we keep flying the aircraft. Now, there's one question we often hear. When should we start our descent? The FAA in the US stipulates that we should start our descent abeam the numbers. In Europe, it stipulates that we should start our descent on the base turn. Flying in both places, I found myself having better results with the last one, starting our descent at the end of our downwind at the beginning of our base. Now it's been 64 seconds and 90 knots. We start turning base and start our descent. We put the aircraft at 500 feet per minute descent and we reduce the power and speed to 1900 RPM and 80 knots. We have a descent of 500 feet a minute and we are heading 150. We have a 060 runway heading at 9 o'clock. On a complex aircraft, it's all the same, second notch of flap and 500 feet a minute of descent. Now it's time for our second GUMS checklist, gas, undercarriage, mixture, prop, and verify the switches. Now we're done flying our base and we are ready to turn into the final. After our final turn, we should be aligned with the runway. Here we overshot it. It's not good. We have to correct that very slightly. Now we can reduce the power, 1800 RPM, 75 knots. The third flap of notch is optional, but we have to maintain 500 feet of descent per minute. Now look at the heading. It's 060 and we should be facing the runway. The aircraft is properly configured and we can fly the final. And now with a complex aircraft, we proceed with another GUMS checklist. Gas, undercarriage out with 3 green lights. Mixture, is it rich? Props, is it full in? The switches, are they on? And now we can proceed. We are ready for the final, which is going to lead us to the landing of the aircraft. Everything we've done so far was to be ready for this last phase. Approach speed of 70-75 knots, 5%, 3 degrees, and about 350 feet per minute. But if everything doesn't look like this, it's not a problem, it's not a big deal. There's another phase of flight we called a missed approach or go around.
Go around.
Alright, nose up, throttle full in, and we just clean up, we just do it again until we are at the stage we can actually accomplish the landing. Now it's a good idea to push the carburetor heat to the off position. We need all the thrust we have available in case we need to go around later on. Now we are at the runway threshold, 50 feet from the ground or 15 meters. Once we're there, we just idle the throttle and pull gently on the yoke and let the aircraft settle down. We land on the main gears, the nose wheel stays up in the air as long as possible and maintain directional control with the rudder. For the twin engine, it's almost the same. Approach speed is a little higher, 80-85 knots. The glide slope is exactly the same, 5%, 3 degrees, that doesn't change. The vertical speed is at 500 feet a minute. And let's proceed with another GUMS check. Gas, undercarriage, mixture, prop, and switches.
3 green, 1 in mirror.
3 green lights, no red, we are ready for landing. And now we are above the runway threshold at 50 feet. The only thing we have to do right now is to flare the aircraft as best as we can and let it sit on the runway. And as we control the aircraft, one more thing we have to do is to put the flaps up. We need to put it in a clean configuration.
Still nose heavy even with 2 notches, isn't it?
In this situation, we took the decision to land with only 2 notches of flaps.
Sector 25, pop off, left off Charlie, straight ahead, right turn Delta, cross runway 11 to the ramp.
Charlie Delta, crossing 11 to the ramp, Seneca 25, pop off.
Alright, last thing before we can actually taxi to the parking is the last TTSR, the very first checklist as well. Write the time, put the transponder on standby, switches off, fuel pumps off, landing lights off, and make sure we are out of the runway. And that's it. That was the traffic pattern. Until next episode, be safe. Bye bye. Thank you for watching.